Most people think food security means planting every year. But what if I told you there are crops you plant once, and they keep feeding you for decades? These plants don't just save money, they save time, effort, and energy as you get older. Annual gardening requires repeated effort every year, along with ongoing costs and risks from weather, pests, and timing. Miss the right moment, and the harvest disappears. Perennial crops work differently. Once planted, they develop strong roots and produce food year after year without replanting. This makes them ideal for busy adults, families, and gardeners who want reliable food with less work as time and energy become more valuable. Stay till the end, because the number one plant can feed your family for generations. Let's start with number 7. Asparagus is proof that patience pays you back. It may not give you instant results, but once it's established, it becomes one of the most reliable food plants you can grow. With a single planting, asparagus can produce harvests for 15 to 20 years, sometimes even longer. That means one decision today can feed you every spring for decades. Unlike many vegetables that appear later in the season, asparagus is one of the first foods to emerge after winter. When most of the garden is still empty, asparagus is already pushing up fresh, nutritious spears. After the first few years, asparagus requires very little attention. Deep roots allow it to survive drought, cold, and neglect better than most annual crops. Once established, it quietly returns year after year without demanding constant care. A single backyard asparagus bed can produce hundreds of spears every spring without replanting. Many gardeners harvest from the same patch their parents or grandparents planted years ago. Compare this to annual vegetables, which require soil preparation, planting, fertilizing, and replanting every single year. Miss a season and you start from zero again. Asparagus doesn't work that way. It rewards consistency and patience with long-term reliability. Plant it once, wait a little, and it feeds you every spring for decades. Let's move on to number 6. If there's a plant that refuses to die, it's rhubarb. This perennial has earned its reputation as one of the toughest food plants you can grow, especially in colder climates where many crops struggle. Rhubarb thrives where winters are long and harsh. Once established, it can live for 10 to 20 years or more, producing reliable harvests with very little attention. Each spring, thick red stalks emerge early, often before most of the garden has fully woken up. This makes rhubarb a dependable food source when fresh produce is still limited. One of rhubarb's most overlooked advantages is its massive leaves. As they grow, they shade the soil, suppress weeds, and help retain moisture. When those leaves die back, they break down naturally, acting as a built-in mulch that protects the plant and improves the soil year after year. Many old farmhouses still have rhubarb growing where no one planted it for decades. Long after the original gardeners are gone, the plant remains, quietly producing food on its own. Unlike fragile annuals that fail if conditions aren't perfect, rhubarb survives neglect, poor soil, and missed care. It doesn't demand rich fertilizer or constant watering to perform well. Rhubarb doesn't need pampering, it just keeps coming back. Let's continue with number 5. Chives might look small, but they're one of the most reliable plants you can grow. This humble perennial herb proves that food security doesn't always come from large crops or dramatic harvests. Once planted, chives return year after year and slowly multiply on their own. Each season, the clumps become thicker, producing more stems without needing to be replanted. They're one of the earliest herbs to emerge in spring and often stay productive well into late fall, providing fresh flavor when other plants fade. Chives add consistent taste to everyday meals without extra effort. A small handful can transform simple food, making them especially valuable for gardeners who want maximum benefit from minimal space. Beyond flavor, chives contain compounds that support immune health and overall nutrition, making them more than just a garnish. One clump of chives can be divided and spread across your entire garden. Over time, a single planting can turn into multiple patches, all producing continuously with basic harvesting. Compare that to store-bought herbs, which often wilt within days and require repeated purchases. Even many annual herbs die quickly and must be replanted every season. Chives behave differently. As long as you harvest them regularly, they respond by growing back stronger and denser. They don't demand special care, rich soil, or constant attention. They simply grow, rest, and grow again. This is the plant that quietly feeds you year after year. Let's continue with number 4. What if kale never needed replanting? That simple idea is what makes perennial kale such a powerful food plant for long-term gardeners. Unlike annual varieties, perennial kale produces edible leaves for 5 to 10 years once established. Instead of starting seeds every season, you harvest from the same plant again and again. In regions with mild winters, it can continue growing year-round, providing fresh greens when most vegetables have stopped. Another advantage of perennial kale is texture. The leaves are generally more tender and less bitter than annual kale, especially during cooler months. This makes them easier to use regularly, rather than feeling like a tough survival food. A single perennial kale plant can replace multiple annual kale plantings. Over several seasons, that means less time spent planting, fewer seeds purchased, and more consistent harvests from the same space. Compare this with annual kale, which grows quickly, bolts under heat stress, and then dies. Once it bolts, the leaves turn bitter and unusable, forcing you to start over. Perennial kale behaves differently. It focuses on long-term growth rather than rushing to seed, which allows it to keep producing usable leaves season after season. With minimal care, it becomes a dependable source of greens that fits naturally into a low-effort garden system. This is how you get fresh greens without constant work. Let's move on to number 3. Good King Henry is what spinach wishes it could be. This traditional perennial green delivers everything gardeners love about spinach, without the frustrations that usually come with it. Unlike annual spinach, which produces for only a short window, Good King Henry continues growing year after year once established. It consistently outproduces spinach over time, providing a steady supply of edible leaves without the need for repeated planting. This makes it especially valuable for gardeners who want dependable greens without constant effort. One of its biggest advantages is its resistance to heat. While spinach quickly bolts as temperatures rise, turning bitter and unusable, Good King Henry stays productive through warm weather. The plant focuses on steady leaf growth instead of rushing to seed, which extends the harvest season dramatically. Both the leaves and the young shoots are edible, adding versatility to a single plant. This means more food from the same space and more options in the kitchen throughout the growing season. While spinach dies in summer, Good King Henry keeps growing. That simple difference changes how reliable your garden can be, especially during unpredictable weather. Spinach is known for its short season and sensitivity to temperature. Good King Henry, on the other hand, is built for long-term production. Once it's established, it becomes a permanent part of the garden rather than a temporary crop. This plant solves one of the biggest problems gardeners face, bolting. Let's move on to number 2. These onions literally walk across your garden. Egyptian walking onions are one of the most fascinating and effortless food plants you can grow, especially if you value reliability over constant work. Unlike regular onions, this plant reproduces on its own. Instead of flowers, it forms small bulb clusters at the top of its stalks. When those bulbs become heavy, they bend to the ground, take root, and start new plants. This natural process allows the onions to spread without human help. Once established, Egyptian walking onions never need replanting. They return year after year, expanding their patch automatically. They are also extremely cold-hardy, surviving harsh winters that would destroy most onion varieties. This makes them ideal for long-term gardens in unpredictable climates. One plant turns into dozens without you doing anything. Over time, a small starting patch can become a permanent onion supply with almost no maintenance required. Compare this to regular onions, which must be planted from seed or sets every year. They demand proper timing, soil preparation, and replanting each season. Miss one step, and the harvest suffers. Walking onions remove that entire process by multiplying on their own. They don't rely on perfect conditions or constant care. They simply grow, spread, and return each season stronger than before. This is food independence at its simplest. Let's finish with number 1. This might be the most underrated survival food in North America. American groundnut is a native perennial vine that offers something rare in gardening: long-term protein production with very little ongoing effort. Once established, this plant forms underground tubers that return year after year. These tubers are rich in calories and contain approximately 15 to 17% protein, making them far more nutritionally dense than many common garden crops. In a world where most protein sources require constant planting or expensive inputs, this alone makes groundnut remarkable. As a perennial vine, American groundnut grows stronger with time. Each season, it expands its root system and increases production rather than needing to be restarted. This long-term growth pattern turns a single planting into a dependable food source that can last for decades. Indigenous communities relied on this plant for centuries. It wasn't grown as a novelty, but as a serious staple food that provided energy, nutrition, and reliability through changing seasons. Compare this to potatoes, which must be replanted every year and are vulnerable to crop failure if timing or conditions are wrong. American groundnut behaves differently. Once it's established, it keeps producing without the yearly reset that most gardeners are used to. This makes it especially valuable for anyone thinking beyond a single growing season. It's not just about food this year, but food for the future. This isn't just a plant, it's a legacy crop. If you had to choose just one of these plants, which one would you grow? That question matters more than it seems. These crops aren't about quick harvests, they're about long-term food security and peace of mind. They reduce yearly effort, lower costs, and keep producing as your energy and time change with age. This is smarter gardening, not harder gardening systems that support you instead of demanding constant work. When you plant perennials, you're investing in stability, resilience, and simplicity. These are the crops your future self will thank you for. Subscribe for plants that work with nature.